The Tuesday morning started like any other in our perfectly orchestrated suburban life. I was preparing breakfast in the kitchen of our Westchester home, the same routine I'd followed for the past 6 years of marriage to Marcus. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the silence with its familiar rhythm while I arranged organic blueberries on his steel-cut oats. Outside, the October leaves painted our manicured lawn in shades of amber and crimson, a picture-perfect backdrop for what I believed was our picture-perfect marriage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus emerged from his home office at exactly 7:15 a.m., just as he had every weekday for the past 18 months of remote work. His sandy brown hair was perfectly styled, his button-down shirt crisp and wrinkle-free. He carried himself with the confident stride of a man who had climbed the corporate ladder to become regional director of sales at Meridian Financial Services, one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. "Morning." "Beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. His cologne, the expensive one I'd bought him for his birthday, lingered in the air as he settled at the breakfast bar. "Big day today?" I asked, sliding his bowl across the granite countertop. This was our dance, the same conversation we'd had countless times before. "Board presentation at 10, he replied, scrolling through his phone with the intensity of someone whose livelihood depended on staying connected. "Richardson wants the Q3 numbers to sing. If we land the Morrison account, we're looking at a 20% revenue increase." I nodded, playing the part of the supportive wife while my mind wandered to my own challenges. As a freelance marketing consultant, I'd been struggling to rebuild my client base after taking 2 years off when we got married. Marcus had insisted I didn't need to work, that his income was more than sufficient for our lifestyle. But lately, something restless had been stirring inside me, a desire for purpose beyond the perfectly maintained home and carefully planned dinner parties. "I might work from the sunroom today," I mentioned, testing the waters. "Better light for the Kozlov Industries proposal." Marcus paused, his spoon hovering over his breakfast. "The sunroom's right next to my office, Claire. You know how important these calls are. Maybe try the guest bedroom upstairs?" The suggestion felt like a gentle push away, but I smiled and agreed. After all, his work was supporting both of us. My little consulting projects were more hobby than necessity, at least according to Marcus's frequent reminders about our financial security. He finished breakfast in his usual efficient manner, kissed my forehead, and disappeared back into his office. I heard the familiar sound of his door closing, followed by the muffled tones of his first conference call of the day. The house settled into its daytime quiet, broken only by the distant hum of his voice through the walls. I settled into the guest bedroom with my laptop, determined to make progress on the Kozlov proposal. The project was small but significant to me, my first real client in 8 months. As I worked, I could hear the rhythm of Marcus's day, the rise and fall of his voice during calls, the brief silences between meetings, the occasional burst of laughter that meant he was schmoozing a client. Around 9:45 a.m., I realized I'd left my project files downstairs in the kitchen. Marcus's big board presentation was starting at 10, so I knew he'd be fully occupied. I crept down the stairs, hoping not to disturb him, when I heard something that made me freeze on the bottom step. Absolute certainty that Meridian doesn't suspect anything. The beauty of this operation is its simplicity. Marcus's voice was coming from his office, but something about his tone was different. Gone was the smooth, professional cadence I knew so well. This voice was harder, more calculating. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I moved closer to his door, which I realized was slightly ajar. Through the crack, I could see his back as he faced his computer screen. Multiple monitors displayed what looked like financial charts and data streams, but the numbers didn't look like anything I'd seen from Meridian Financial Services. "The Jenkins account alone netted us $2.7 million, Marcus continued. "By the time they realize their portfolio's been drained, we'll have moved the funds through 3 offshore accounts. Completely untraceable. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. Jenkins. I knew that name. Robert Jenkins was one of Marcus's biggest clients, an elderly widower who'd entrusted Marcus with his entire retirement savings. Marcus had mentioned him several times, always in glowing terms about the man's trust and loyalty. Richardson's presentation today will keep the board distracted, Marcus went on. While they're congratulating themselves on Q3 numbers, we'll be executing the final phase. Morrison Industries isn't just a potential client, they're our exit strategy. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain Marcus would hear it. Through the gap in the door, I could see his screen more clearly now. Financial spreadsheets filled one monitor, but they weren't Meridian's standard format. These showed account numbers I didn't recognize, transfer amounts in the millions, and destination banks in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. On his second monitor, I could see a Zoom call in progress. 3 other faces stared back at Marcus from their own cameras. A stern-looking woman with platinum blonde hair, a heavy-set man with a thick accent, and someone whose camera was turned off, but whose screen name read Architect. The Morrison presentation is our masterpiece, the blonde woman was saying. Once their board approves the $20 million fund transfer, we'll have exactly 48 hours before their auditors notice the discrepancy. That's our window. And Meridian? Asked the heavy-set man. Richardson and the board will be too busy dealing with the FBI investigation to worry about a few missing employees, Marcus replied, with a coldness that made my blood freeze. By then, we'll be ghosts. The person labeled Architect finally spoke, their voice electronically disguised. Remember, everyone burns their bridges tonight. Delete everything, wipe the servers, and execute the transfer simultaneously at 3 a.m. Eastern. No communication after that until we reach the rendezvous point. I backed away from the door, my legs trembling. The man I'd been married to for 6 years wasn't just a successful financial advisor. He was running an elaborate theft operation that was about to steal millions from his own clients and disappear. The Morrison account, the board presentation, even his relationship with me. All of it was an elaborate facade for what sounded like the biggest heist in Meridian's history. I stumbled back upstairs, my mind reeling. How long had this been going on? How many clients had been robbed while I made him breakfast and ironed his shirts? The thought made me physically ill. I rushed to the bathroom, barely making it before my stomach emptied itself. Sitting on the cool tile floor, I tried to process what I'd heard. Marcus was planning to disappear in less than 24 hours, leaving behind a trail of financial destruction that would ruin dozens of families. Elderly clients like Robert Jenkins would lose their life savings. Meridian Financial Services would be destroyed, and likely many innocent employees would lose their jobs. And me? What was my role in his escape plan? Was I meant to disappear with him? Or was I just another loose end to be tied up? I forced myself to think clearly. First, I needed to understand the full scope of what Marcus was planning. Second, I had to figure out how to stop it without getting myself killed in the process. Because if Marcus could steal millions without a shred of guilt, what would he do to protect his secret? I waited until I heard him leave for lunch. His Tuesday routine included a working lunch with clients that I now suspected were co-conspirators. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I was in his office. The room looked exactly as it always did. Expensive desk, leather chair, framed certificates from various financial institutions lining the walls. But now I saw it all differently. The certificates weren't achievements, they were props. The family photos weren't expressions of love, they were part of his cover story. His computer was locked, but I knew Marcus well enough to guess his password. He was a creature of habit, and for the past 6 years, he'd used variations of the same theme for everything. I tried Claire Marcus 2018, our wedding year. No luck. Then Claire Marcus 06, the month we met. The screen unlocked. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Spreadsheets detailed systematic theft going back 3 years. Client accounts had been slowly drained through fake investment opportunities and phantom administrative fees. The amounts were staggering. $2.7 million from the Jenkins account, $4.1 million from the Patterson Family Trust, $1.8 million from a retirement fund for teachers. The list went on, but it wasn't just theft, it was targeted. Marcus had deliberately sought out vulnerable clients, elderly widows, retirees, families planning for their children's education. He'd gained their trust, positioned himself as their financial guardian, and then systematically robbed them blind. In a folder labeled Personal Contingencies, I found something that made my blood run cold. A detailed background check on me, including financial records, family information, and what appeared to be psychological profiles. One document was titled Spouse Management Protocol and outlined various scenarios for dealing with me if I became a liability. The scenarios ranged from manipulation and gaslighting to more permanent solutions. There were references to making my depression worse, staged accidents, and something called terminal option that I didn't want to think about too deeply. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking as I captured evidence of my husband's crimes and his plans for my potential elimination. Hidden in another folder, I found communications with someone called the Cleaner, discussing evidence disposal and witness management. As I dug deeper, the full scope of the operation became clear. Marcus wasn't just an employee at Meridian. He had been systematically placing Confederates throughout the company for years. Sarah Chen in accounting, David Rodriguez in IT, even Margaret Walsh in HR were all part of the conspiracy. They had turned Meridian Financial Services into their personal money laundering operation, using legitimate business operations to hide massive theft. The Morrison Industries deal was their grand finale. They planned to steal the entire $20 million fund transfer, then disappear while framing Richardson and the legitimate board members for the theft. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the money would be untraceable, and the thieves would be living under new identities in non-extradition countries. I found travel documents hidden in a secret compartment of Marcus's desk drawer. Multiple passports with his photo but different names, airline tickets to various destinations, and bank account information for what appeared to be safe deposit boxes around the world. There was even a passport with my photo, and the name Catherine Williams, suggesting he had planned to take me with him, at least initially. But the spouse management protocol made it clear that I was only a temporary asset. Once they reached their destination, I would become a liability who knew too much. The documents outlined how my accidental death during the escape would actually strengthen Marcus's new identity as a grieving widower. I was still photographing documents when I heard Marcus's car pulling into the driveway. Panic shot through me as I realized he was back early from lunch. I quickly closed all the files, made sure his computer looked exactly as I'd found it, and raced upstairs to the guest bedroom. From my window, I watched Marcus get out of his car and stand in the driveway for a moment, talking on his phone. Even from a distance, his body language looked agitated. Something had gone wrong. I forced myself to appear normal when he came inside, though my heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. Marcus appeared in the guest bedroom doorway, his expression unreadable. "How's the proposal coming?" he asked, his voice carrying that same professional tone he used with clients. "Good," I managed, not trusting myself to say more. He nodded, but his eyes were scanning the room, taking in details. "I'm going to be working late tonight. Big day tomorrow with the Morrison presentation. You might want to plan on eating dinner without me." "Of course," I replied. "I understand." But I understood much more than he realized. As Marcus disappeared back into his office, I heard him making a phone call. Though I couldn't make out the words, his tone was urgent, almost frantic. I looked at my phone, filled with photographs of evidence that could bring down Marcus and his entire operation. The question was, what was I going to do with it? If I went to the police immediately, Marcus might escape before they could act. If I waited too long, innocent people would lose their life savings, and I might not survive to see justice done. The afternoon stretched endlessly as I pretended to work while actually planning my next move. Marcus's office was unusually quiet. No more conference calls, no casual conversations. just the occasional sound of rapid typing and the printer running continuously. By evening, the house felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Marcus emerged from his office only to grab coffee and a sandwich, barely acknowledging my presence. When I offered to cook dinner, he declined with barely concealed impatience. "I told you I'd be working late," he said, his voice sharper than usual. "Don't wait up." As night fell, I realized this might be my last evening in this house, possibly my last evening alive. If Marcus discovered that I knew about his plans, I had no doubt that my name would be added to his list of problems to be cleaned up. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds from his office. Occasionally, I heard muffled phone conversations, the whir of his paper shredder running constantly, and what sounded like files being moved around. Marcus was preparing for his final escape, destroying evidence and tying up loose ends. At 2:30 a.m., the house finally fell silent. I waited another hour, then crept downstairs to peek into his office. Marcus was slumped over his desk, apparently asleep. Multiple computer screens still glowed, showing what appeared to be bank transfer confirmations and deletion processes running automatically. This was my chance. I had evidence of the crime, but I needed to act fast before Marcus woke up and executed his final plan. But as I stood there watching him sleep, I realized that stopping the theft was only part of the problem. Marcus had been planning to take me with him and then kill me. Even if I stopped the current scheme, what would prevent him from trying again? What would prevent him from eliminating me as a witness to his crimes? The man I had loved and trusted for 6 years had never existed. The person sleeping at that desk was a criminal mastermind who had been playing me like a fiddle, using our marriage as cover for massive theft while planning my eventual murder. As I stood in the darkness of our home, I realized that I wasn't just fighting to stop a financial crime. I was fighting for my life and for the lives of all the innocent people Marcus was planning to destroy. The real Marcus was about to wake up, and when he did, one of us wouldn't survive the encounter. The question was, would it be the trusting wife who had discovered too much, or the master criminal who had finally met his match? But first, I had to make sure the authorities knew what was happening before 3 a.m., when Marcus and his team planned to execute their final theft and disappear forever. The clock was ticking, and I had less than an hour to save not just myself, but dozens of innocent victims who had no idea their life savings were about to vanish. The clock on Marcus's computer screen read 2:47 a.m., 13 minutes until the systematic destruction of dozens of lives would begin. I stood frozen in the doorway of his office, watching my husband of 6 years sleep peacefully while his computers worked automatically to steal $20 million. My phone felt impossibly heavy in my pocket, weighted down by the photographs of evidence that could bring down the entire operation. But calling the police now would take too long. By the time they arrived, verified my claims, and traced the transactions, Marcus and his team would have vanished with the money. Innocent families would wake up to discover their life savings had disappeared overnight. I needed a different plan. Something immediate. Something that would stop the theft while keeping me alive long enough to see justice done. Moving silently to Marcus's desk, I studied the multiple monitors still glowing in the darkness. One screen showed a countdown timer, 11 minutes and 32 seconds. Another displayed a series of automated transfer protocols, all queued and ready to execute. The third monitor showed an encrypted chat room where messages were still appearing from Marcus's co-conspirators. Architect, systems green across all nodes. Standing by for final authorization, blonde woman, Sarah Chen. Meridian servers show normal activity. Security protocols disabled. Heavy-set man, David Rodriguez. Offshore accounts confirmed. Transfer pathways tested and verified. I realized they were all awake, waiting for Marcus to give the final go-ahead. If I woke him now, he'd simply complete the theft and disappear. But if I could somehow disrupt their coordination, an idea formed in my mind. Dangerous but potentially effective. I carefully positioned myself at Marcus's keyboard, praying the slight movement wouldn't wake him. With trembling fingers, I began typing in the chat room, impersonating my husband. Marcus, Meridian. Abort. Repeat, abort. FBI traced the Morrison connection. They're on to us. The response was immediate and panicked. Architect. Confirm abort command. This is not protocol. Sarah Chen. Marcus, are you compromised? Your message encryption is irregular, I cursed silently. Of course they'd have security protocols I didn't know about. But I was committed now. I typed rapidly, trying to sound like Marcus in crisis mode. Marcus, Meridian. No time to explain. FBI raid team en route to Meridian. Execute emergency shutdown now. Transfer protocols changed to Contingency Plan Delta. David Rodriguez. Contingency Plan Delta requires tri-verification. Waiting for secondary confirmation, my heart sank. I had no idea what Contingency Plan Delta was, let alone how to provide secondary confirmation. But then I noticed something in Marcus's file still open on another screen, a document titled Emergency Protocols. Scanning quickly, I found the section on Contingency Plan Delta. It was their disaster scenario. Instead of stealing the full $20 million, they would grab what they could immediately and scatter, destroying all evidence behind them. The verification codes were listed right there in the document. Marcus Meridian, Delta Authorization, Crimson 7 Alpha 9, Immediate Dispersal. No further communication until rendezvous. Architect, confirmed. Initiating emergency shutdown. All assets secure what you can and burn everything else. I watched the monitors as chaos erupted across their network. Transfer amounts dropped from millions to thousands as they grabbed whatever funds they could access immediately. Instead of the carefully orchestrated heist they'd planned, I'd triggered their panic response. Marcus stirred in his chair, and I quickly moved away from the computer. He mumbled something in his sleep but didn't wake. On the screens, I could see the conspiracy collapsing in real time. Account access was being revoked, servers were being wiped, and the automated transfer. Protocols were canceling themselves. It wasn't perfect. They were still going to steal some money, but I'd reduced a $20 million heist to maybe $2 million in emergency grabs. More importantly, their careful coordination was shattered. But my relief was short-lived. A new message appeared in the chat room. Architect, something's wrong. Marcus's IP shows dual access. Someone else is on his terminal. Sarah Chen. Trace shows keyboard activity while Marcus's webcam shows him asleep. David Rodriguez. We're compromised. Initiating Scorched Earth Protocol. I didn't need to look up what Scorched Earth Protocol meant. The name was self-explanatory. They were going to eliminate all evidence and witnesses, including me. Marcus's phone buzzed on his desk. Once. Twice. On the third buzz, his eyes snapped open. He looked directly at me standing in his office doorway, and I saw the exact moment he realized what had happened. "Hello, Claire," he said, his voice carrying none of the warmth I'd known for 6 years. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." The pretense was over. The loving husband mask had been discarded, revealing the cold criminal beneath. Marcus stood slowly, his movements predatory and controlled. "How long have you known?" he asked, moving to block my path to the door. "Long enough?" I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Long enough to know what you did to the Jenkins account, and the Patterson Family Trust, and all the others." Marcus's expression didn't change. No shame, no regret, no attempt at explanation or justification. Just calculation. "You've made this unnecessarily complicated," he said, reaching into his desk drawer. "The plan was to take you with me initially. New identities, new life, tropical beaches. You would have enjoyed it for a while." "Before you killed me," I finished for him. He shrugged. "Eventually. You were always too curious, Claire. Too smart for your own good. But I thought I had more time to manage the situation." From his drawer, he pulled out something that made my blood freeze, a syringe filled with clear liquid. "This would have been easier in Belize," he continued conversationally. "A drowning accident. Tragic, really. Poor woman couldn't swim. Husband tried desperately to save her. Very traumatic for the grieving widower. My mind raced. Marcus was between me and the office door, but there was a window behind his desk. Could I break through it? The drop to the backyard was substantial, but survivable. Maybe. You're wondering about the window, Marcus observed, following my gaze. 2-story drop onto concrete patio. Even if you survived, you'd be too injured to run. And I'd still have to finish the job anyway. I forced myself to look directly at him, to meet his eyes. You won't get away with this. The FBI has no idea this operation exists, Marcus interrupted. You triggered our emergency protocols, yes, but that just means we scatter a few days early with a smaller take. No one will connect a few missing accounts to a coordinated theft. We've been planning this for 3 years, Claire. Every contingency has been considered. A new message alert sounded from his computer. Marcus glanced at the screen, and for the first time, his confident expression flickered. Architect. Local police dispatch shows units en route to your address. Ida 4 minutes. Interesting, Marcus said slowly. Did you call the police, Claire? I hadn't, but I wasn't about to tell him that. Let him think I'd been more prepared than I actually was. You have 3 minutes to decide, I said, bluffing desperately. Run now and maybe you'll escape. Stay here and try to kill me, and you'll be arrested for murder. Marcus looked at his monitors, where his co-conspirators were all going dark, their connections dropping one by one as they fled. His grand plan was crumbling, and he had to choose between salvaging something from the wreckage or eliminating the witness who'd destroyed everything. The police don't know about the financial crimes, he said, more to himself than to me. Even if they arrest me for domestic violence, there's no evidence connecting me to the theft. The computers will be wiped clean by morning. He was talking himself into completing his original plan. I could see the decision forming in his eyes. Besides, he continued, raising the syringe, by the time they break down the door, this will look like a tragic suicide. Poor woman couldn't handle discovering her husband's affair, decided to end it all. I'll be the devastated widower who tried to stop her. I backed toward the window, calculating distances. An affair? That's your cover story? Oh, Claire, Marcus smiled coldly. You have no idea how deep this goes. Sarah Chen isn't just my co-conspirator in the theft. We've been together for 2 years. Our entire marriage has been her idea. She needed someone with a stable family life to avoid suspicion at Meridian. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Marcus been planning to steal millions and kill me, but our entire relationship had been orchestrated by his real partner. Every anniversary, every shared moment, every time I'd worried about disappointing him, all of it had been a performance for an audience of one. Sarah's been monitoring you through the security system we installed last year, Marcus continued, advancing toward me. Those cameras weren't for burglars, Claire. They were to make sure you never got too close to the truth. I remembered the home security upgrade Marcus had insisted on, how he'd personally overseen the installation, making sure cameras covered every room except his office. I'd thought it was excessive, but I'd trusted his judgment. The best part, Marcus said, now only a few feet away, is that after tonight, Sarah and I will be free to be together openly. New identities, unlimited funds, and no inconvenient wife to manage. The sound of sirens was growing louder outside. Marcus heard them too, and his movements became more urgent. Time's up, Claire. He lunged forward with the syringe, but I was ready. I grabbed the heavy crystal paperweight from his desk, a gift from one of his victims, ironically, and swung it at his wrist. The impact sent the syringe flying across the room. Marcus roared in anger and pain, clutching his injured hand. But he was stronger than me, and he recovered quickly. As he reached for me with his good hand, I heard a sound that changed everything. The front door splintering open. FBI. Nobody move! Marcus froze, his hand inches from my throat. Through the office doorway, I could see tactical flashlights sweeping through our living room. Heavy boots pounded up the stairs. Claire Morrison? A voice called out. Are you in the house? In here! I shouted back, never taking my eyes off Marcus. Back office! 3 agents in tactical gear burst through the doorway. weapons drawn and trained on Marcus. He raised his hands slowly, his expression shifting back to confused innocence. "Officers, thank God you're here," he said, his voice taking on the concerned husband tone I knew so well. "My wife has been acting strangely all evening. I think she may be having some kind of breakdown." But the lead agent wasn't buying it. "Marcus Morrison, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs clicked shut around Marcus's wrists, he looked at me with pure hatred. "How?" he demanded. "How did they know?" The lead agent smiled grimly. "Your friend Peterson has been working with us for 6 months. Every move you made, every plan you discussed, every crime you committed, we have it all on record. Peterson. Marcus's plant in senior management. The one I'd thought was part of the conspiracy. Agent Peterson's been building a case against your entire network," the agent continued. "We've been monitoring your communications, tracking your transfers, and documenting your operation. We just needed you to attempt the final theft to make the charges stick." I sank into a chair, the adrenaline finally wearing off. "So the police sirens?" "We were already on our way," the agent explained. "When our surveillance picked up unusual activity on your husband's computers tonight, we moved up our timeline. Good thing, too. Looks like he was planning more than just theft. They'd found the syringe. The agents were treating it as evidence of attempted murder." As Marcus was led away, he turned back one final time. "This isn't over, Claire. Sarah's still out there. She knows where you live, where you work, who you care about. Watch your back." The threat hung in the air as the agents escorted him to their vehicle. Through the window, I watched the man I'd married disappear into the night, not as a loving husband, but as a federal prisoner. Agent Peterson, the real Agent Peterson, appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm sorry we couldn't bring you into our confidence earlier. Your husband was too suspicious, and we couldn't risk compromising the investigation. What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Now we round up the rest of the network. Sarah Chen, David Rodriguez, and several others. The evidence your husband's computers provided tonight will help us trace their movements and recover what stolen funds we can." I thought about all the victims, the elderly clients who'd trusted, Marcus with their life savings, the families who'd planned futures that were now destroyed. Will people get their money back? Agent Peterson's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "Some of it, maybe most of it, if we move fast enough. But there will be losses. There always are in operations like this." As the FBI team finished processing the scene, I found myself alone in my house for the first time in years. But it didn't feel like home anymore. Every room held memories that were now revealed as lies. Every shared moment had been a performance. Even the walls seemed tainted by the deception that had played out within them. My phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello, Claire." The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "This is Sarah Chen. I believe you know who I am." My blood turned to ice. She was supposed to be in FBI custody by now. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah continued. "Your little performance tonight saved me from a rather unpleasant fate. While the authorities were focused on Marcus and his dramatic arrest, I was able to secure certain assets and disappear. Marcus always was too sentimental about keeping you around." "The FBI will find you," I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Sarah's laugh was cold and calculating. "Perhaps, but not before I finish what Marcus started. You see, Claire, you cost me $20 million tonight. That debt needs to be collected, with interest." The line went dead. Standing in my violated home, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage and my life, I realized that Marcus's arrest was just the beginning. Sarah Chen was still out there, with resources and connections I couldn't imagine. She'd proven herself willing to destroy innocent lives for money, and now she had a personal vendetta against me. The FBI had caught the puppet, but the puppeteer was still pulling strings. And her next target was clear. As I double-checked every lock in the house and drew every curtain, I understood that my fight for survival was far from over. Marcus had been the face of the operation, but Sarah had been its brain. And unlike Marcus, she had nothing left to lose. The safe house smelled like industrial disinfectant and fear. Agent Peterson had moved me there immediately after Sarah's threatening phone call, insisting that my compromised home was no longer secure. For 3 days, I'd been living in a nondescript apartment on the outskirts of Albany, watching the news coverage of what the media had dubbed the Meridian heist, while FBI technicians worked around the clock to trace Sarah Chen's location. She's a ghost, Agent Peterson admitted during our morning briefing. Sarah Chen doesn't exist beyond 5 years ago. Before that, we hit a wall. False social security number, fabricated employment history, even dental records that lead nowhere. I stared at the surveillance photos spread across the kitchen table. Images of Sarah from Meridian's security cameras, from Marcus's phone, from their stolen moments together. In every picture, she appeared confident, in control, calculating. The woman who had orchestrated my marriage and planned my death. But we know she's still in the area, Agent Martinez added, joining us from the command center they'd set up in the living room. Financial forensics traced several emergency accounts she accessed after Marcus's arrest. All local banks, all accessed in person. She's not running, I realized. She's finishing what she started, Agent Peterson nodded grimly. The pattern suggests she's tying up loose ends. David Rodriguez was found dead in his apartment yesterday morning. Apparent suicide, but the forensics don't match. Professional hit disguised as despair. I felt cold despite the safe house's stifling heat. How many others? 2 more from their network are missing. We're operating under the assumption they're already dead. Agent Martinez pulled up a digital map on her tablet. Sarah's eliminating everyone who can testify against her. You're the only witness left who can place her at the center of the conspiracy. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. 23 innocent families had lost their life savings because of Sarah's operation. Elderly clients like Robert Jenkins were facing poverty in their golden years. 3 people were already dead, and more would follow if Sarah escaped justice. What's the plan? I asked. We wait, Agent Peterson replied. Sarah will come for you eventually. When she does, we'll be ready. But waiting felt like cowardice. For 6 years, I'd been passive in my own life, letting Marcus make the decisions while I played the role of supportive wife. I'd trusted when I should have questioned, accepted when I should have investigated. My passivity had enabled Sarah's crimes as much as Marcus's lies had concealed them. No, I said, standing up from the table. We're not waiting anymore. Agent Peterson raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Morrison, you're not trained for this kind of operation. Neither were Robert Jenkins and the Patterson family. But they're victims anyway. I walked to the window, looking out at the gray Albany morning. Sarah thinks she's hunting me. What if we turn the tables? Agent Martinez leaned forward. What are you suggesting? Sarah's weakness is her ego. She spent years believing she's smarter than everyone around her. She manipulated Marcus. She deceived Meridian security. She even fooled the FBI for 3 years. I turned back to face them. But she made one mistake. She told me she was coming for me. That's not a mistake, Agent Peterson protested. That's a threat. It's arrogance, I corrected. She could have disappeared after Marcus's arrest. Instead, she's risking exposure for personal revenge. That's not professional calculation. That's wounded pride. I could see Agent Martinez considering the possibility. You want to draw her out? I want to give her what she expects. A frightened widow hiding in a safe house, making predictable moves, following FBI protection protocols. I smiled for the first time in days. Sarah's been studying me for years. She knows my patterns, my fears, my weaknesses. Let's use that against her. Over the next hour, we developed what Agent Peterson called the most reckless plan in Bureau history. But Agent Martinez understood the psychology behind it. Sarah Chen was a predator who had spent years stalking her prey. Predators became careless when they thought the hunt was too easy. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would leave the safe house publicly, creating multiple opportunities for Sarah to strike. But each apparent vulnerability would actually be a trap, with FBI surveillance and tactical teams positioned to respond instantly. She'll expect you to go to your sister's house in Connecticut, Agent Martinez explained as we reviewed the operation timeline. It's the obvious choice for someone seeking family support after a trauma. So that's where we'll start, I agreed. But we'll make sure she has other options too. Phase 1 began that afternoon. I left the safe house in my own car, deliberately avoiding the FBI escort that Sarah would expect. As I drove toward Connecticut, I followed a route that would take me past 3 locations where Sarah could potentially ambush me: a secluded rest stop, a poorly lit gas station, and a stretch of country road with limited visibility. FBI surveillance teams were positioned at all 3 locations, but I wasn't told their exact positions. Agent Peterson wanted my behavior to appear genuinely nervous and unpredictable, not rehearsed. The drive to my sister's house was the longest 2 hours of my life. Every car that followed too closely, every van parked on the roadside, every shadow at the gas station could have been Sarah preparing to strike. But nothing happened. I arrived at Janet's house safely, just as we'd planned. Claire. My sister embraced me at the front door, her relief genuine despite knowing this was partly theater. I've been so worried since I saw the news. Janet had been briefed on the plan, but her emotions were real. She'd watched me marry Marcus, celebrate our anniversaries, build what she thought was a happy life. Discovering that it had all been an elaborate criminal conspiracy had shaken her almost as much as it had me. The FBI says you might be in danger, she whispered as we went inside. Are you sure this is safe? Safer than hiding, I replied, hoping I was right. That evening, we went through the motions of normal family comfort. Janet cooked my favorite meal. We watched old movies. We talked about childhood memories that felt precious now that I understood how much of my adult life had been a lie. But underneath the normalcy, we were both listening for sounds that didn't belong. Car engines that idled too long, footsteps on the gravel driveway, windows opening in empty rooms. Nothing. Phase 2 began the next morning. I made a very public trip to the bank where Marcus and I had maintained our joint accounts. The FBI had made sure local news cameras would be present, ostensibly covering the ongoing investigation, but actually broadcasting my location to anyone watching. As I walked up the steps to First National Bank, I felt exposed and vulnerable. Sarah could be anywhere in the crowd of reporters, disguised as a passerby, positioned in a building across the street. But the FBI tactical teams were there too, invisible but ready. The morning air carried the crisp bite of early autumn, and every breath felt like it might be my last. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward gray clouds that threatened rain. Reporters clustered around the bank entrance, microphones thrust forward like weapons, cameras capturing every angle of what they thought was just another routine investigation follow-up. Mrs. Morrison, can you comment on your husband's crimes? The questions came rapid-fire from multiple directions. How long did you know about the theft? Are you seeking therapy for the trauma? Will you be testifying against your husband? I kept my head down, playing the role of the overwhelmed widow just trying to piece her life back together. But my eyes scanned constantly, searching faces in the crowd, checking windows in the buildings across the street, watching for any movement that didn't belong. Agent Martinez's voice crackled softly in my nearly invisible earpiece. All stations report clear. Proceed to entrance. The bank's marble steps felt endless. Each footstep echoed against the classical columns, a steady rhythm that seemed to announce my presence to anyone watching. A woman in a red coat stood near the corner, talking on her phone. Was she genuinely making a call, or was she Sarah in disguise? A delivery truck idled across the street, its driver visible in the cab. Could Sarah be using it as cover for a sniper's position? Target approaching entrance. Agent Martinez's voice updated the surveillance team's position throughout the area. All units maintain overwatch. I pushed through the heavy glass doors into the bank's lobby, grateful to escape the exposed feeling of the street, but knowing that inside wasn't necessarily safer. The familiar scent of furniture polish and paper money did nothing to calm my nerves. FBI technicians had been here since dawn, installing additional cameras and checking sightlines. But Sarah was a former intelligence operative. She would know how to exploit weaknesses that ordinary criminals couldn't see. The bank manager, Mrs. Henley, greeted me with the practiced sympathy of someone who dealt with too many financial disasters. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. We've prepared all the documentation you requested." Her office was on the second floor, accessible by a staircase that felt like walking through a shooting gallery. Every window along the way offered Sarah a potential position for an attack. My hands trembled as I gripped the handrail, and it wasn't all performance. "Coverage is good," Agent Martinez's voice assured me through the earpiece. "3 teams have eyes on all approaches. You're safe, but safety was an illusion." Sarah had demonstrated her ability to appear anywhere, eliminate anyone, and vanish without a trace. The FBI might have superior numbers and technology, but Sarah had the advantage of desperation and nothing left to lose. Mrs. Henley's office overlooked the main street, providing a clear view of the media circus below and the surrounding buildings where Sarah might be positioned. As we went through the paperwork to close the joint accounts Marcus and I had shared, I found myself studying every face on the street, every shadow and every window. "The transfer will take approximately 45 minutes to process," Mrs. Henley explained, her fingers dancing across her computer keyboard. "Given the complexity of the federal investigation, we need to verify each transaction with multiple departments." 45 minutes. 45 minutes of sitting exposed in a fishbowl office while Sarah planned her attack. I forced myself to nod and appear grateful for the bank's thoroughness, but internally I was counting seconds until I could escape. Through the window, I watched the reporters growing restless. Some had started interviewing random passers-by, fishing for quotes about financial fraud or neighborhood safety. Others were setting up for longer broadcasts, clearly planning to stay until something newsworthy happened. "More teams arriving on scene," Agent Martinez reported. "We have the entire block covered now. If she's here, we'll spot her. But would they spot her in time? Sarah had already proven she could kill quickly and efficiently, then disappear before authorities could respond. David Rodriguez had been found dead in his apartment 12 hours after anyone had seen him alive. Margaret Walsh had been manipulated into becoming an unwitting assassin. Sarah's methods were varied and adaptable. 20 minutes into the transaction, Mrs. Henley excused herself to coordinate with the bank's federal compliance officer. I was alone in the office, staring out at the street below, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Wave to the camera in the window across the street. "3rd floor, second window from the left." My blood turned to ice. I looked up at the building Mrs. Henley had indicated, and there in the window was a figure holding what appeared to be a high-powered camera with a telephoto lens. The figure raised one hand in a mock salute. Sarah. She was less than 200 yards away, well within range for a precision shot, and she was taunting me. Playing with her prey before making the kill. I touched my earpiece to activate the emergency channel. "She's here. Building across the street, 3rd floor, second window from the left." Agent Martinez's response was immediate. "All units, target acquired. Building 2, 3rd floor. Teams Alpha and Bravo, secure that location now." But even as I watched, the figure in the window disappeared. Sarah had shown herself deliberately, knowing it would trigger the FBI response, and had already moved to her real position. Another text arrived. "By the time your friends reach that empty office, I'll be somewhere else entirely. But I wanted you to know I'm close. Very close." My hands were shaking openly now, and Mrs. Henley would notice when she returned. I had to maintain the facade of a nervous widow conducting routine business, not a federal witness in immediate danger of assassination. The bank manager returned with a stack of forms requiring my signature. "Just a few more documents and we'll have everything processed," she said cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the tactical operation unfolding outside her window. As I signed papers transferring funds and closing accounts, my phone continued to buzz with messages from Sarah. "The reporter in the blue suit used to work for me." "He's not really a reporter. The woman in the red coat has been watching you since you left your sister's house yesterday. The delivery truck has been on this street for 2 hours. Normal deliveries take 15 minutes. Each message revealed how thoroughly Sarah had infiltrated the area around the bank. The FBI's surveillance might be comprehensive, but Sarah's network was already in place, hidden among the legitimate reporters and ordinary citizens. Target not found in designated building, Agent Martinez reported through my earpiece, expanding search to adjacent structures, but I knew they wouldn't find her. Sarah was too smart to stay in one location after revealing herself. She was mobile, probably moving through a pre-planned route that would bring her closer to the bank while staying ahead of the FBI sweep teams. Another text. Check the reflection in your office window. Look carefully. I turned slightly, pretending to review the papers I was signing, and caught sight of the window's reflection. There, in the building directly behind the bank, a building the FBI hadn't. Mentioned in their surveillance coverage, I could see a figure adjusting. What looked like a rifle scope. She had positioned herself where she could observe both the bank and the FBI's response to her decoy location. While the tactical teams searched the wrong building, Sarah was setting up her real attack position. I couldn't warn Agent Martinez without alerting Mrs. Henley that something was wrong. If I broke cover now, it might trigger Sarah to take her shot immediately. But if I waited much longer, she might achieve perfect positioning for an attack the FBI couldn't prevent. The bank manager was explaining something about federal reporting requirements, her voice a distant hum as I calculated angles and distances. Sarah's new position gave her a clear shot at the office windows, but it also exposed her to counter-surveillance if the FBI knew where to look. Mrs. Morrison? Mrs. Henley's voice broke through my tactical analysis. Did you hear my question about the safe deposit box? I'm sorry, I replied, forcing my attention back to the conversation. Everything's been so overwhelming lately. Could you repeat that? As Mrs. Henley explained the process for accessing the safe deposit box Marcus and I had shared, I sent a text to Agent Martinez's emergency number. Real position, building behind bank. Rifle scope visible in reflection. The response was immediate movement outside the bank. Tactical teams shifted positions with the fluid precision of a well-rehearsed dance. But Sarah must have been watching for exactly this kind of response, because my phone buzzed with one final message. Too late. Move away from the window, now! I lunged sideways, just as the office window exploded in a shower of glass and splintered wood. Mrs. Henley screamed and dove under her desk as a high-velocity rifle round punched through the chair where I'd been sitting seconds earlier. Chaos erupted throughout the bank. Alarms blared, customers shouted in panic, and security guards rushed toward the staircase. Through my earpiece, I could hear Agent Martinez coordinating the response. Shots fired. All units converge on target building. Medical team to the bank immediately. But Sarah was already gone. Through the shattered window, I could see FBI agents swarming the building she'd fired from, but I knew they would find only an empty room and a rifle set up to fire remotely. Sarah had never been in that building at all. She's more patient than we expected, Agent Martinez reported that evening as we reviewed the day's surveillance footage. Or more paranoid. Or she's planning something bigger, I suggested. Phase 3 was the riskiest part of our plan. I would return to my house, the scene of Marcus's arrest, and the place where Sarah knew I felt most vulnerable. The FBI had made sure news of my return would reach local media, creating the impression that I was trying to reclaim my normal life despite the ongoing threat. But first, we had to address a complication that had emerged during the bank visit. The security cameras had captured something unexpected. Margaret Walsh, the HR director from Meridian who we'd thought was part of Marcus's conspiracy, watching from across the street. She disappeared before FBI agents could approach her. Margaret was supposed to be in custody, Agent Peterson said, reviewing the footage. She was arrested with the others 2 days ago. Agent Martinez pulled up Margaret's file. Released on bail this morning. Her lawyer argued she was a low-level participant with minimal flight risk. Sarah got to her, I realized. Margaret's the bait for the real trap. The realization changed everything. Sarah wasn't just planning to kill me. She was planning to frame someone else for the murder. Margaret Walsh, already facing federal charges, would be the perfect patsy. A disgraced HR director seeking revenge against the woman who'd brought down her conspiracy. We need to reconsider this operation, Agent Peterson said. If Sarah's planning to use Margaret as cover, the risk level just doubled. But I was done being careful. No, we stick to the plan. But we add one modification. That night, I returned to my house for the first time since Marcus's arrest. The FBI had released the crime scene, but the place still felt contaminated by everything that had happened there. Walking through rooms where I'd lived happily for years, knowing that every moment had been a lie, was like touring a museum of my own delusions. I went through the motions of normalcy, unpacking clothes, checking mail, turning on lights in every room. But my real focus was on the security system that Marcus had installed, the one Sarah had used to monitor me for 2 years. If she was watching, she would see a woman trying to rebuild her life while struggling with paranoia and fear. At midnight, I made my move. Instead of going to bed as expected, I went to Marcus's office and began searching through the papers the FBI had left behind. I made sure to position myself directly in view of the hidden camera Sarah had used to spy on me. On cue, my phone rang. "You just don't learn, do you?" Sarah's voice was cold with fury. "After everything that's happened, you're still digging where you don't belong." "I'm trying to understand how I lived with a stranger for 6 years," I replied, making my voice sound tired and defeated. "You lived with Marcus because I allowed it. Your marriage existed because it served my purposes. Even your precious sister visits are happening because I'm letting them happen." The threat was clear. Sarah had been watching Janet's house too. "What do you want?" I asked. "Justice. You cost me $20 million and the perfect cover identity. Marcus was supposed to be my retirement plan and you destroyed it." "Marcus was a criminal." "You're both criminals." Sarah's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Marcus was a tool. A means to an end. Do you think someone like him could have planned an operation this sophisticated? He was barely competent enough to follow orders. Despite everything, the revelation stung. Even in his criminality, Marcus hadn't been the mastermind. He'd been another victim of Sarah's manipulation, just like me. "I've been watching you for 3 days," Sarah continued. "The safe house in Albany, the visits to your sister, the bank transaction, and now back home where it all started. You're trying to draw me out." My blood ran cold. She'd seen through our entire operation. "But here's what you don't understand, Claire. I've been planning this conversation since the moment Marcus was arrested. Every move you've made, every decision your FBI friends have helped you reach, I've been anticipating." Through the window, I saw movement in the backyard. A figure in dark clothing moving toward the house. "Margaret Walsh is about to break into your home," Sarah said conversationally. "She's armed, unstable, and desperate to eliminate the witness who destroyed her life. When police find your body and hers, it will be a clear case of murder-suicide. Margaret's guilt over the conspiracy drove her to kill you, then herself." I dropped the phone and ran toward the front door, but I was too late. Margaret burst through the back entrance, wild-eyed and trembling, holding a gun with shaking hands. "She said you'd be here," Margaret sobbed. "She said if I didn't do this, she'd kill my grandchildren." The gun was pointed at me, but Margaret's hands were shaking so violently I wasn't sure she could hit anything intentionally. Behind her, I could see Sarah Chen emerging from the shadows of the kitchen, wearing black clothing and a satisfied smile. "Hello, Claire," Sarah said calmly. "Time to finish what we started." But I'd learned something important during my 3 days of FBI training. Sometimes the best plan is the one nobody expects. Instead of running or pleading, I looked directly at Margaret. "She's going to kill you too," I said simply. "The moment I'm dead, you become a liability. She's already murdered David Rodriguez and 2 others from your network." Margaret's eyes widened. "David's dead?" "Professional hit, made to look like suicide," I continued, watching Sarah's confident expression flicker. "Just like yours will be. Sarah doesn't leave witnesses, Margaret. She never planned to let either of us survive tonight." "Shut up," Sarah snapped, pulling out her own weapon. "Margaret, do what we discussed." But Margaret was looking back and forth between us, her desperation giving way to dawning realization. "You said David was in witness protection. You said he was safe." "I said what I needed to say to get you here," Sarah replied coldly. "Just like I told you your grandchildren were in danger." "They're fine, Margaret." "They were never at risk. You are. The gun in Margaret's hand swung toward Sarah. You lied about everything. Of course I did. You're all expendable. That's when the FBI tactical team burst through every entrance simultaneously. Margaret dropped her weapon and collapsed to her knees in relief. Sarah tried to run, but found herself surrounded by agents with weapons drawn. As the handcuffs clicked shut around Sarah's wrists, Agent Peterson emerged from behind the tactical team. Sarah Chen, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, fraud, and attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent. But Sarah wasn't silent. As the agents led her away, she looked back at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, she snarled. You think you've won, but you have no idea how deep this goes. I have friends you can't imagine, resources you'll never find. Maybe, I replied, but you're going to federal prison, and I'm going to make sure every one of your victims knows that justice was served. The investigation that followed revealed the true scope of Sarah's operation. She hadn't just been stealing from Meridian's clients. She'd been running similar schemes at 4 other financial firms across the East Coast. The total theft exceeded $60 million, making it one of the largest financial fraud cases in federal history. Margaret Walsh received immunity in exchange for her testimony about Sarah's threats and coercion. She genuinely believed her grandchildren were in danger and had been manipulated into believing David Rodriguez was alive and safe. Her cooperation helped the FBI track down several offshore accounts where Sarah had hidden stolen funds. Most importantly, the evidence Margaret provided helped investigators understand Sarah's true identity. She wasn't just a financial criminal. She was a former intelligence operative who'd gone rogue 5 years earlier, using her training to build criminal networks across multiple industries. The recovery efforts took months, but ultimately, 80% of the stolen funds were returned to victims. Robert Jenkins got his retirement savings back. The Patterson family trust was restored. Elderly widows who'd faced poverty got their security back. Marcus pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. During his testimony, he revealed that he genuinely believed he loved me, even while planning my death. Sarah had convinced him that killing me was necessary for both their safety, and he'd been weak enough to accept her logic. I never meant for it to go so far, he told me during our final conversation in the federal courthouse. At first, it was just small amounts, skimming a little here and there. Sarah said it was victimless. 23 families lost their life savings, I replied. 3 people are dead. How is that victimless? Marcus had no answer. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Sarah Chen received life without parole. At her sentencing, she showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives she'd destroyed. She sat silently as victim after victim testified about the impact of her crimes, her expression never changing. But I noticed something the court reporters missed. When Robert Jenkins testified about nearly losing his home because of her theft, Sarah's hands clenched into fists. When Maria Patterson spoke about her children's college funds disappearing, Sarah's jaw tightened. She wasn't emotionless. She was angry that her victims had found their voices. After the trial, I sold the house in Westchester. Too many memories, too many lies embedded in every room. Instead, I used my share of the recovered funds to start a nonprofit organization helping victims of financial fraud. We provide legal assistance, emotional support, and practical help for people trying to rebuild their lives after being betrayed by trusted financial advisors. The work is demanding but meaningful. Every client we help is a victory against predators like Sarah and Marcus. Every family that recovers their savings is proof that evil doesn't always win. I never remarried. Trust doesn't come easily after discovering that your marriage was an elaborate criminal conspiracy. But I've learned to trust myself again, to listen to my instincts instead of dismissing them, to investigate when something doesn't feel right. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that Tuesday morning when I overheard Marcus planning his final heist. If I'd ignored what I heard, if I'd convinced myself I was imagining things, if I'd chosen denial over investigation, dozens of families would have lost everything. The FBI estimates that Sarah's network would have stolen over $100 million if their operation had continued. 3 more people would have died, and I would have been found dead in Belize, another victim of a tragic drowning accident. But I chose to listen. I chose to act. I chose to fight back against people who thought they were untouchable. The inscription on my office wall reads, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." It's a reminder that passivity enables predators, that silence protects criminals, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to look away. Marcus left his Zoom on that Tuesday morning, and what I saw changed everything. But what mattered wasn't just what I discovered, it was what I chose to do about it. Evil exists. Predators hunt. Innocent people suffer. But justice is possible when good people refuse to stay silent. And sometimes, the person best positioned to fight back is the one the predators underestimated most, the quiet wife who was supposed to be their perfect victim. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.